May 11, 1982, early afternoon. The waterfront along Northern Avenue in Boston. Brian Halloran sits in the passenger seat of a blue Datsun, waiting for a ride home. He's nervous. He should be. 3 weeks earlier, he walked into the FBI's Boston field office and told them something dangerous, that Whitey Bulger murdered a man named Roger Wheeler. He gave them names, dates, details. He asked for protection. He asked to be placed in the Federal Witness Protection Program. Strike Force Chief Jeremiah O'Sullivan denied the request. The FBI said they would handle it. They handled it all right. What Halloran didn't know, what he couldn't have known, was that FBI Supervisor John Morris had already passed his name to Agent John Connolly, and Connolly had already passed it to Bulger. The very agency Halloran trusted with his life had signed his death warrant. Kevin Weeks, Bulger's enforcer, served as lookout that afternoon on Northern Avenue. He radioed in a code, "The balloon is in the air." Within minutes, a 1975 Chevy Malibu pulled alongside the Datsun. Bulger, allegedly wearing a wig and a floppy mustache, opened fire with automatic weapons. Halloran's body bounced off the pavement. And Michael Donahue, a 32-year-old Teamster truck driver, father of 3, whose son had just made his first communion that same week, died beside him. His only crime was offering a friend a ride home from a bar. This wasn't a rogue agent. This wasn't one bad decision. This was a system, a machine built over 2 decades inside the most powerful law enforcement agency on Earth. A machine that protected a serial murderer, leaked the names of cooperating witnesses who were then executed, fabricated intelligence reports to justify the arrangement, and buried the evidence under layers of institutional silence. At least 19 people were murdered, while the FBI looked the other way. 4 innocent men spent a combined century behind bars for a crime the Bureau knew they did not commit. And when the bill finally came due, it cost American taxpayers more than $113 million. This is how the FBI did not just fail to stop Whitey Bulger. This is how they built his empire. It starts with a beach, late 1975. Wollaston Beach in Quincy, Massachusetts. 2 men sit in an agency Plymouth sedan after dark. One is John Connolly, FBI agent, a South Boston native, a man who grew up idolizing the Bulger brothers in the Old Harbor Housing Project. He had joined the Bureau in October 1968 with a recommendation letter from House Speaker John McCormack to J. Edgar Hoover himself. After stints in Baltimore, San Francisco, and New York, he transferred to the Boston field office in 1973 with one personal mission: to recruit Whitey Bulger as a top echelon informant. The other man in the car is James Whitey Bulger, leader of the Winter Hill Gang, a career criminal with a 9-year federal prison stint behind him and a reputation for controlled, calculated violence. Connolly's pitch was simple. The Italian mafia was already feeding the FBI information about Bulger's crew. "Why not fight fire with fire?" Connolly said. "Use us to do what they are doing to you." Bulger agreed with one condition: he would never be called an informant. He would be a strategist. The FBI opened him as confidential source BS 1544TE, BS standing for Boston, TE standing for top echelon, the Bureau's highest informant classification. But here's the thing most people miss. Bulger wasn't even the FBI's first corrupt bargain in Boston. His partner, Stephen Flemmi, had been an informant since 1965, a full decade earlier, under agents H. Paul Rico and Dennis Condon. When those agents moved on, Condon transferred Flemmi's file directly to John Connolly in the early 1970s. The corruption wasn't born in 1975. It was inherited, passed down from one generation of agents to the next, like a family business. And just like a family business, each generation expanded the operation. Connolly didn't work alone. His direct supervisor was John Morris, head of the FBI's Organized Crime Squad in Boston from December 1977 onward. Morris was supposed to provide oversight to ensure handlers followed protocol, kept professional distance, and verified the intelligence their sources provided. Instead, he became a full partner in the arrangement. He cooked dinner for Bulger and Flemmi at his home in Lexington, Massachusetts. He drank imported wine with them, so much that Bulger's crew nicknamed him Vino. At one gathering at the Colonnade Hotel in 1983, Morris and Connolly let gangsters listen to highly classified Title III wiretap recordings from the FBI bug inside Mafia boss Jerry Angiulo's headquarters at 98 Prince Street in the North End. Those recordings were supposed to be among the most sensitive intelligence the Bureau possessed. Morris got so drunk that night, a gangster drove him home. The formal rules required Connolly to meet informants individually in controlled settings, with detailed 209 reports filed after every contact. The actual arrangement violated every single one of those rules. Joint meetings with both Bulger and Flemmi were a direct protocol breach. Social dinners, gifts, and a verbal understanding that Morris later admitted under oath. At a dinner at his Lexington home, Morris told Bulger and Flemmi directly that they could do anything they wanted as long as they did not clip anyone. Flemmi testified they shook hands on it. What the gangsters wanted in return was simple: a head start, advance warning, if indictments were ever coming so they could run. They clipped plenty, and they got their head start when it mattered most. Above Morris, a succession of special agents in charge either knew what was happening or chose not to look. Lawrence Sarhat privately warned a colleague that Connolly and Morris might have leaked information, then did nothing about it. James Greenleaf buried a recommendation to close Bulger as an informant and refused the DEA's offer to jointly investigate Bulger's drug operations. James Ahern conducted a review of Bulger's informant status by reading Connolly's own files and talking to Connolly himself. Then, when the Boston Globe reported Bulger was an informant in 1988, Ahern publicly called it absolutely untrue. In 1989, Ahern sent a secret memo to the FBI director heaping praise on Connolly, what prosecutors later described as the high watermark in the FBI's peculiar view of Bulger. And when agents in the field raised real concerns, when ASAC Robert Fitzpatrick recommended in 1981 that Bulger be shut down as an informant, the FBI organized crime chief Sean McWeeney in Washington overruled him personally. In May 1982, after the Wheeler and Halloran killings, agents from Boston, Miami, Oklahoma City, and FBI headquarters met in Washington, acknowledged that Bulger and Flemmi were murder suspects, and decided to keep them open as informants because they were extremely valuable assets. When the DEA launched Operation Beans in 1983, targeting Bulger's drug trafficking, a high-ranking FBI official in Washington contacted Boston to ask why their informants were being targeted, a direct act of institutional protection. The Bureau didn't just tolerate the corruption, they defended it from the top. And prosecutor Jeremiah O'Sullivan made it worse. In 1979, he excluded Bulger and Flemmi from a major race-fixing indictment, a decision that sent Winter Hill gang boss Howie Winter to prison and handed Bulger control of the entire organization. O'Sullivan would later admit to Congress, "You got me." He also testified that confronting the FBI about its informants was impossible. That was the holy of holies, inner sanctum, and they would not have allowed me to do anything about that. Here's how the machine actually worked, step by step, dollar by dollar, body by body. The intelligence laundering came first. Bulger and Flemmi fed Connolly scraps of information about their Italian mafia rivals, the Angiulo brothers and the Patriarca family, just enough to justify their existence on paper. Connolly inflated those scraps in his reports, making his informants appear invaluable. The FBI credited Bulger with providing a sketch of Angiulo's headquarters at 98 Prince Street, the sketch that helped agents plant the bugs, which led to the 1986 prosecution. But the sketch was actually drawn by Flemmi. Morris admitted this on the stand, and under oath, he said he knew the information was false. Kevin Weeks later testified that 90% of the intelligence Connolly credited to Bulger actually came from Flemmi. Connolly took information from other sources and attributed it to Bulger. He allowed Bulger to place disinformation in FBI files about crimes his own gang committed. Before retiring in 1990, Connolly filed a final report suggesting his two informants were packing it in and going into various legitimate businesses, which federal prosecutors later characterized as money laundering. Flemmi put the whole arrangement in perspective. He said that he and Whitey gave them shit, and they gave them gold. FBI brass in Washington rewarded Connolly because his reports produced mafia convictions. Connolly protected Bulger because Bulger made his career. Morris approved it all because he was in too deep to stop. The cycle fed itself, and nobody asked whether the intelligence was real, because asking that question would collapse the entire structure. But the intelligence laundering was only half the machine. The other half was the leak system, and this is where people died. Every time someone cooperated against Bulger, Connolly, or Morris found out. And every time they found out, Bulger found out. The pattern was consistent, methodical, and lethal. Nowhere was it more devastating than in the World Jai Alai murder chain, a sequence of 3 connected killings that shows exactly how FBI corruption amplified violence. It starts with a skim. Retired FBI agent H. Paul Rico, one of the original handlers from the Flemmi era, had become security chief at World Jai Alai in Connecticut. He set up a scheme diverting an estimated $10,000 per week from the company to Bulger, Flemmi, John Callahan, and himself. When owner Roger Wheeler discovered the irregularities and launched an audit, Callahan asked Bulger for a hit. On May 27, 1981, John Martirano flew to Tulsa, Oklahoma, walked up to Wheeler at the Southern Hills Country Club, and shot him once between the eyes with a .38 caliber snub-nosed revolver. Wheeler was still sitting in his car in the parking lot. When the Tulsa FBI office asked Boston for help investigating, the Boston office sent a terse reply ruling out any Boston connection, effectively obstructing a murder investigation to protect their informants. That created a problem. Brian Halloran knew about the Wheeler hit and tried to cooperate. Morris leaked his name. On May 11, 1982, Halloran and Michael Donahue were gunned down on Northern Avenue. That created another problem. John Callahan, the man who had requested the Wheeler hit, was now the only living link between the murders and Bulger's crew. Connolly warned Bulger that Callahan was a weak link who would fold under pressure. Martirano was dispatched to Florida. He later testified that he objected, that Callahan was a friend of his, and that eventually they convinced him it was 2 against 1. On July 31, 1982, Callahan was shot in the back of the head at Fort Lauderdale Airport. His body was stuffed in the trunk of his Cadillac and left at Miami International Airport with a dime placed on the chest, the mob symbol meaning "do not drop a dime." Connecticut investigators who had flown to Florida to question Callahan arrived at the airport just as his body was discovered. 3 murders, all connected, all enabled by FBI protection. Wheeler died because the skim was discovered. Halloran died because he tried to tell the truth about Wheeler. Callahan died because he knew too much about both. And they weren't the only ones. Richard Castucci, a Revere nightclub owner and FBI informant since 1970, gave the Bureau information about the whereabouts of 2 Winter Hill Gang fugitives hiding in New York. Connolly revealed Castucci's status to Bulger. On December 29, 1976, Martirano shot Castucci in the temple at a Somerville garage. His body was stuffed in a sleeping bag in the trunk of his own car. John McIntyre was a 32-year-old Quincy fisherman who cooperated with authorities on an IRA gun-running case involving the trawler Valhalla. Connolly leaked it. McIntyre was lured to 799 East 3rd Street in South Boston, chained to a chair, and interrogated for hours by Bulger. Bulger wrapped a rope around his neck and tried to strangle him. The rope was too thick. He asked, "Do you want one in the head?" McIntyre answered, "Yes, please." Bulger shot him. His body was buried in the dirt floor basement of that house, alongside Arthur Bucky Barrett, a safecracker who refused to give Bulger a cut from a $1.5 million bank job and was forced to reveal $47,000 hidden at his home before being shot with a MAC-10, and Deborah Hussey, Flemmi's 26-year-old stepdaughter, whom Flemmi had sexually abused since her teens. After each killing, Flemmi pulled the victim's teeth to hinder identification. Bulger took a nap, while Weeks and Flemmi buried Barrett's body. On Halloween 1985, all three bodies were exhumed and reburied near Florian Hall in Dorchester. They were not found until January 2000 after Weeks cooperated. For this protection, Connolly received more than $235,000 in documented cash payments, a 2-carat diamond ring, and cases of imported wine. He acquired a house in South Boston, a house on Cape Cod, and a boat. As U.S. Attorney Michael Sullivan would later say, John Connolly became a Winter Hill Gang operative masquerading as an FBI agent. Morris received $7,000 in cash, wine, a silver-plated wine bucket, and paid airfare for his mistress. 1 week after Halloran was murdered, after Morris had leaked his name, Morris called Connolly and asked him to have Bulger send $1,000 to fly his girlfriend to Georgia. Bulger obliged. But the corruption in Boston did not start with Connolly and Morris. It started a decade earlier with the Deegan case, and this is the part that should keep you up at night. On March 12, 1965, Edward Teddy Deegan was shot dead in an alley in Chelsea, Massachusetts. The FBI knew it was coming. They had a memo from October 1964 documenting that informant Jimmy Flemmi wanted Deegan dead, and another memo dated March 10, 1965, just 2 days before the murder, sent to FBI Director Hoover himself, disclosing that Flemmi and Joseph Barboza planned to carry out the killing. No agent warned Deegan. No agent intervened. They were recruiting Jimmy Flemmi as a top echelon source, and protecting him was more important than preventing a murder. The actual killers included Barboza and Jimmy Flemmi, both FBI informants, but when Barboza agreed to testify, he refused to implicate his friend. Instead, he named 4 innocent men, Peter Limoni, reportedly because Limoni refused to fire a waitress Barboza was involved with, Joseph Salvati because Salvati owed him a $400 loan shark debt, Henry Tamaleo, and Louis Greco. Agents Rico and Condon met with Barboza more than 30 times before his grand jury testimony and 26 times before trial, knowing every word was fabricated. The FBI possessed at least 20 reports identifying the real killers. They shared none of them with prosecutors or defense attorneys. After the convictions, the Bureau sent letters of commendation to Rico and Condon. All 4 men were sentenced to death in July 1968. Their sentences were commuted to life after Furman versus Georgia in 1972, but the damage was done. Henry Tamaleo died in prison in 1985. His wife also died while he was incarcerated. Louis Greco died in prison in 1995. His son later committed suicide. Salvati was finally paroled in 1997 after more than 29 years. Limoni was released in January 2001 after 33 years, 2 months, and 5 days. Barboza had actually recanted his testimony as early as July 1970, but the FBI induced him to withdraw his recantation by promising to arrange his release from prison. The exonerating evidence was finally discovered in December 2000 by Special Prosecutor John Durham during the broader Bulger-Flemmi investigation. On July 26, 2007, Judge Nancy Gertner ordered the government to pay $101,750,000, the largest wrongful conviction award in American history. She wrote that the FBI's misconduct was clearly the sole cause of this conviction, and that FBI officials allowed their employees up the line to ruin lives. The First Circuit upheld the award in August 2009, calling the FBI's conduct intentional, outrageous, and beyond all bounds of decency. The direct line from the Deegan case to Bulger is institutional. When Rico and Condon retired, Condon turned over Stephen Flemmi's informant file to John Connolly. Same program, same methods, same willingness to let people die. At its peak, Bulger's criminal enterprise generated an estimated $25 to $30 million annually from extortion, drug trafficking and loan sharking, revenue that the FBI's protection made possible. Civil judgments against the U.S. government exceeded $113 million. The Limone and Salvati families received $101.7 million, the McIntyre family $3.1 million, the Castucci family $6.25 million, and the Davis, Hussey, and Liddiff families a combined $2.85 million, all paid by American taxpayers, not by the agents who caused the damage. And in South Boston, an entire community was devastated by a drug trade the FBI knowingly allowed to flourish, a community that had trusted Bulger, trusted the government, and been betrayed by both. Every system has a weakness. For this one, it was not the FBI. It was a federal judge who refused to look the other way. In 1995, when Stephen Flemmi was arrested on racketeering charges, his defense attorney filed a motion claiming the FBI had authorized his criminal activity. Most judges would have dismissed it. Judge Mark Wolf did not. He demanded the FBI confirm or deny Flemmi's informant status, the first time anyone in authority had forced the Bureau's hand. Then Wolf opened 9 months of evidentiary hearings from January to October 1998. Agents took the stand. Documents surfaced that the Bureau had fought for years to keep buried. Wolf's 661-page ruling in September 1999 confirmed everything. The leaks, the fabricated reports, the murders, the institutional cover-up. But Bulger was already gone. On December 23, 1994, Connolly had warned him that sealed indictments were coming. Bulger fled with Catherine Grieg and vanished. He had prepared. Safe deposit boxes stuffed with cash and passports were stashed in Clearwater, Oklahoma, Montreal, Dublin, London, Birmingham, and Venice. Congress took over next. The House Committee on Government Reform, chaired by Representative Dan Burton, held hearings from 2001 to 2003 that produced some of the most explosive testimony in modern congressional history. Retired Agent H. Paul Rico, by then in his 70s, was wheeled into the hearing room and confronted about Salvati's 30 years of wrongful imprisonment. His response was 6 words that captured the Bureau's entire attitude toward the people it destroyed. "What do you want, tears?" Former prosecutor O'Sullivan admitted under oath that he had exercised prosecutorial discretion on behalf of Bulger and Flemmi. When confronted with his own contradictory memo, he said simply, "You got me." The committee subpoenaed Billy Bulger, then president of the University of Massachusetts. He testified for nearly 4 hours on June 19, 2003, claiming under immunity that he did not know where his brother was. Chairman Burton accused him of selective memory loss. He was forced to resign from the University of Massachusetts. The final report, titled "Everything Secret Degenerates," ran 1,802 pages across 2 volumes and concluded that federal law enforcement had actively worked to prevent homicide cases from being resolved in 7 states. It documented well in excess of 20 murders committed by government informants. The DOJ Inspector General's 2005 report confirmed the systemic rot. 87% of all FBI confidential informant files examined had guideline violations. Field agents still were not familiar with the reformed guidelines 2 years after implementation. The system was not broken by one rogue agent. It was designed to fail. Connolly was convicted twice. He received 10 years in federal prison in May 2002 for racketeering, obstruction, and lying to the FBI. Then he was sentenced to 40 years in Florida in November 2008 for the second-degree murder of John Callahan, the first time a federal agent was ever convicted of murder for protecting an informant. The judge told him he had crossed over to the dark side. Morris received full immunity in exchange for testimony against Connolly. He was never charged, never disciplined, and he retired from the FBI with his pension and his freedom. Who do you think was more corrupt, Connolly, who ran the operation, or Morris, who looked the other way and let people die? Let me know in the comments. But the fall of the FBI's corrupt alliance did not end the story. The consequences played out for decades in courtrooms, in prisons, and on a quiet street in Santa Monica, California. For 16 years, Bulger and Grieg lived as Charlie and Carol Gasco in a rent-controlled apartment at 1012 3rd Street in Santa Monica, 3 blocks from the Pacific Ocean. They paid $837 a month in cash. Grieg told neighbors Bulger had early signs of Alzheimer's to explain why he rarely left the apartment. Behind the drywall, investigators found $822,198 in cash and more than 30 firearms. Bulger sat on the FBI 10 Most Wanted list alongside Osama bin Laden. The reward reached $2 million, the largest ever offered for a domestic fugitive. He was featured on America's Most Wanted 16 times. Sightings were reported in 19 countries. And the whole time, he was 3 blocks from the beach. In June 2011, the FBI shifted tactics, running a public service announcement that targeted Grieg, not Bulger, focusing on her love of plastic surgery and salon visits. Anna Bjornsdottir, a former Miss Iceland who had been a neighbor and had bonded with Grieg over caring for a stray cat, saw the CNN report from her home in Reykjavik and called the FBI. On June 22, 2011, agents lured Bulger to his parking garage by telling him someone had broken into his storage locker. He did not resist. He told agents they knew who he was and that he was Whitey Bulger. His trial lasted 2 months with 72 witnesses. Martirano described 13 killings in 2 days on the stand. Weeks testified that over the radio during the Halloran hit, he said the balloon is in the air. Flemmi described watching Bulger strangle Deborah Davis and Deborah Hussey. Bulger refused to testify and maintained to the end that he was never an informant. The jury convicted him on 31 of 32 counts, including 11 murders. He received 2 consecutive life sentences, plus 5 years. On October 30, 2018, Bulger was transferred to USP Hazelton in West Virginia after an unexplained medical downgrade enabled his removal from a Florida facility where he had been receiving cardiac care. Well over 100 Bureau of Prisons officials knew about the transfer in advance. Inmates at Hazelton discussed it for days before he arrived. Some placed bets on how long he would survive. Bulger arrived at approximately 8:30 p.m. on October 29. By 6 a.m. the next morning, he was dead. Fotios Freddy Guiash and Paul DeCollegiero entered his cell while a third man stood lookout. They spent about 7 minutes inside. The 89-year-old wheelchair-bound Bulger was bludgeoned with a lock attached to a belt. His eyes were nearly gouged out. His tongue was nearly cut off. The traditional mob punishment for a rat. The DOJ Inspector General's December 2022 report found serious job performance and management failures at multiple levels, but remarkably, no evidence of malicious intent by BOP employees. In September 2024, Guiash pleaded guilty to voluntary manslaughter and received 25 years, a largely symbolic sentence on top of his existing life term. Where are the others now? Connolly was released on compassionate release in February 2021 with a terminal cancer diagnosis. He is in his mid-80s, living at home in Massachusetts, and still collecting his FBI pension. The Florida Parole Board ruled in April 2023 that he can remain free indefinitely. Morris never spent a single day behind bars, full immunity, full pension, full freedom. Flemmi is 90 years old. He is in federal prison. He cooperated against Bulger. His parole date is set for the year 2218. Weeks cooperated, served 5 years, and lives quietly in Massachusetts. Grieg completed her sentence in July 2020, and she lives with her twin sister in South Boston. Martirano confessed to 20 murders. He served 12 years, and he is a free man in Massachusetts. Despite everything, the investigations, the reforms, the $113 million in judgments, the FBI's informant program still operates with more than 15,000 active sources. The same fundamental structure remains with only cosmetic changes. In 2010, the Mark Rossetti case proved the lessons had not taken hold. Another Boston area FBI informant was caught committing violent crimes on the Bureau's payroll. The Bulger family's $200 million wrongful death lawsuit was dismissed in January 2022, and that dismissal was upheld on appeal. Most victims' families have exhausted their legal options. The institutional accountability that Congress demanded never fully arrived. Connolly collects a government pension. Morris was never charged. The $113 million came from taxpayers, not from the men who leaked names, fabricated reports, and enabled murders. And Flemmy paints replicas of old masters in a federal cell, waiting for a parole date that falls in the 23rd century. Here is the thing about the FBI's deal with Whitey Bulger. It was not a failure of the system. It was the system working exactly as designed. The top Echelon informant program rewarded agents who cultivated high-value sources. The more valuable a source looked on paper, the faster an agent's career advanced. Nobody asked whether the intelligence was real. Nobody asked what crimes were being committed to sustain the relationship. Nobody asked who was dying. Asking those questions meant losing the asset, and losing the asset meant losing the career. That program still exists. That structure is still in place. And while the FBI was protecting Whitey Bulger in Boston, letting him kill, letting him traffic, letting him destroy an entire neighborhood, another FBI agent was doing the exact opposite, going undercover inside the mafia itself. No badge, no backup plan, living as someone else for 6 years, knowing that one wrong word meant a bullet in the back of the head. His name was Joe Pistone. The world knows him as Donnie Brasco. And that story is one you need to hear next.